Welcome to the Aaron Harber Show, Colorado Business News. And today joining me are three members of the Colorado General Assembly. We're talking about a number of topics that affect business. With me from the State Senate is Nancy Todd. Thank you, Senator, for joining me.
You're very welcome. Again? Good to be here.
Oh, always a pleasure. And from the House, Sue Ryden. Thank you, Sue.
Thank you.
And Susan Lontine, also from the Colorado House of Representatives.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. All right, we talked about a bunch of topics in part one. Now that we're in part two, let's talk about the judiciary system, the courts, and our correction systems as well. Kind of big issues in the state and big dollars as well. Let me start off with, let's talk about corrections. We seem to have so many challenges in that field in terms of the number of people in prison, the cost of prisons, rates of recidivism. What's the big challenge? Sue, I'm going to start with you. What are the big challenges and what do we need to do about them?
Those things that you just mentioned are really the big challenges. I think Colorado has really made some steps forward over the last several years. We have looked at a lot of ways that we can keep our folks from even getting into prison in the first place. We've developed a number of alternative courts. We have a mental health court, we have a veterans court, we have a drug court. Arapahoe County has really been very progressive on these issues. In fact, there's a graduation this week of a class of folks that are going to graduate and not end up going to prison, but they have found other ways to be able to solve their issues. So that has been a big thing that we've done. Most states have found that they're spending an awful lot of money, having an awful lot of people in prison who maybe would be doing better outside. And so there's a lot of work on transitioning folks so that you're not just, having them locked up and then sent out on the street without any preparation. A lot of wraparound services that we're trying to do now, and our recidivism rates are lower as a result.
Are we funding those kind of programs sufficiently or not?
No, we're not funding anything sufficiently in the state of Colorado.
Spoken like a true Democrat.
But it's true. We really do pinch pennies in our state. We have a very lean government, and we really make people work really, really hard for the dollars that are in their programs. So, yes, every single agency that comes to us every year for budget has way more need than we can fill.
In terms of, Nancy, the courts, a lot of times you hear the courts are overburdened, are understaffed. What's happening with our judicial system?
Well, there's no question they're overburdened and understaffed. You see the dockets that are very lengthy, and by the time someone actually gets to go to court, they may have already been able to resolve the issue because of the time constraint. I think what Representative Ryden just mentioned is right on in terms of some alternative different court systems that are set up. And I've actually attended some of the graduations in Arapahoe County, particularly the drug courts. And you see a celebration of someone who has been able to have the dignity to be able to make that resolution, as opposed to it being a law enforcement, but an inner solution. And those are probably longer term longer term resolutions, as opposed to we're going to send you to jail for 3 days, or we're going to make that more of the punishment side. I think that without talking about mental health, we absolutely have to address the prevention. And I think that when you see and you hear the cases that judges hear over and over, 9 times out of 10 you can return it back to a mental health issue, an education issue, a dysfunctional family setting. And so the solutions are prevention. And the more we put into prevention at the front end, I believe that the costs for the judicial system can be reduced. But right now, I think that our judges are they're inundated, and it really is an evidence of the dilemma that we face as a country, and particularly in Colorado, of problem solving. Can two people sit down and have conflict resolution, or do they need to have a third person to help them resolve it? And does it have to be a judge, or can some other kind of remediation take place? And so I think those are some of the things that I always look at, and I'm hopeful that we can move forward on.
Would it make sense, I mean, given the fact, I mean, you have courts today, judges, as you said, with ridiculous dockets in terms of the number of items. That makes it difficult for them to give cases the attention they want to give them, and that the people involved, the parties certainly want their judges and law clerks to pay enough attention to what they're doing. Difficult to do when you have that kind of burden. You have courtrooms where you no longer have court reporters, so that's a problem also for the participants in the judicial process, including the judges and their staffs as well. Does it make sense to require mediation, for example, or even in certain cases perhaps binding arbitration for certain types of cases, or civil cases of a certain dollar amount or less, so that judges spend their time on really the most important or biggest cases? Does something like that make sense at all? I mean, any thoughts?
Based on what I understand, our binding arbitration system, it's almost as, if not more expensive, to prepare for those cases for the parties involved than it is to just go to court.
I think
so I don't know that that would be a solution for everybody. Maybe it would help relieve the courts of some burdens, but I don't know that it would make really any sense.
Right. I mean, actually, binding arbitration is what happens when you go into a courtroom. I mean, an arbiter makes a decision, a judge makes a binding decision as well. Of course, it's easier to appeal a judge's decision than one through arbitration. In fact, in most cases, it's very difficult to do. But how about mediation? Should mediation be required of just about every case, or would that be wasteful as well?
You know, I'm not enough of an expert to tell you. I don't know.
I'm a real fan of mediation. I'm a real fan of starting to equip our students and in the workplace. How do you resolve? How do you come to a resolution? Maybe even at the State House we could have a little bit of conflict resolution. But
this is Conflict Resolution Month, by the way.
But I think that it is. This is Conflict Resolution Month, and so looking at those skills, that instead of saying let it just escalate to a point where you've got to have somebody come in and be the mom or the dad to make those decisions. Take some self-responsibility and figure out how do you make some of those resolutions.
How do we get people to not have to go to court in the first place? Especially on, I mean, the courts, certainly the criminal side's a real challenge, but the civil side as well. But I'm on the criminal side, because it seems so many resources are dedicated by the state to the criminal side as opposed to the civil side, where the parties usually certainly initially have to bear those costs. What can we do? What can we do to get people to behave better?
Well, I think Senator Todd hit the nail on the head earlier when she talked about the issue of mental health. Whatever we can do to prevent anyone from committing any kind of crime would benefit our jails. And I know that our jails are now becoming our top mental health provider. Our jails are full of people who have mental health issues and substance abuse issues. So if we would look at tackling those issues, I think we would see a huge reduction in our criminal cases to begin with.
All right, so how do we do that? How do we tackle mental health issues in a substantive way? And I know I'm out of time on this segment, but give me a thought.
Well, I think part of that is through schools. You know, we talk about bully proofing, or we talk about conflict resolution. Those are programs and those are things that are being taught today. And so making sure that we support that and that we have a balance with an academic pressure as well as the socialization and good, strong mental health. And I apologize, I think I just cut you off. Representative Ryden, jump in.
No
Go ahead, Sue, please.
Well, we have done quite a bit in the prisons with our therapeutic communities. So we do have folks that go through a very strenuous program, and it often has incentives of being able to get out of prison earlier and we're seeing the recidivism rates go way down because they are going through a full mental health program. One of the issues that our inmates have is that they do get good health care when they're in prison, and they also get medication for any kinds of mental health problems that they might have. And the issue is, can we continue that for them when they get out? And so those are things that we're really working on. I would like to say something about the civil courts, and one thing that the judiciary, when they come to the Joint Budget Committee and ask for more money, it's often because so many people are going pro se. In other words, they're representing themselves, and it's especially true in the civil courts. And it's causing the judiciary to have to do a huge education program just to give folks an idea of what they need to be prepared for when they get there. So that's something that's a relatively new development, partly because they may not be able to afford lawyer fees, and partly because they watch it on TV and think they can do it themselves. So that has been a huge new development in the pro se arena.
All right, and with pro se, when you talk about judges educating pro se, well, they're not clients, pro se parties, the judges, this isn't a general education program. They have to do that individually every time they have a case where you have a pro se party. So that burden is really, maybe we need to make a video or something. If you're going to go pro se, you have to take this course.
That is exactly what is happening. They are doing educational materials to help people get ready. Yeah.
All right, well, I can't wait to watch that one. We're going to take a break. We'll be back with Susan Lontine, Sue Ryder, and Nancy Todd.
For information on how to help promote civil and mutually respectful discourse and support expansion of the distribution of our programs, please email info@harbertv.com.
Hi, I'm Aaron Harber, host of The Aaron Harber Show. For information about the program, who our upcoming guests and topics are, and ways you can participate, please go to our website. That's harbertv.com. And most of all, thanks for watching.
I'm Mary Robinson, former President of Ireland.
Hi, I'm Jim Cameron, Director of Avatar.
I'm Christina Johnson, former Undersecretary of Energy.
Hi, I'm Oliver Stone.
Hi, I'm Mike Peters. I'm the creator of Mother Goose and Grimm.
Watch The Aaron Harber Show.
I would encourage you to watch the Aaron Harber Show. It's good fun.
Watch the Aaron Harber Show because he's a really cool guy.
Please watch the Aaron Harber Show, on which I do appear.
I want you to watch the Aaron Harber Show. Grimmy watches it every day.
I'm Aaron Harber, host of The Aaron Harber Show. You can follow the show on Twitter and find us on Facebook to get all the latest updates, see behind-the-scenes photos, and make comments and ask me questions. You can see episodes before their TV broadcast, so like the show today.
Your opinions, ideas, suggestions, and criticisms related to guests, topics, questions, or the host are welcome. Please send an email to producer@harbertv.com.
Welcome back to the show. We're talking about the judicial system and wrapping up a couple issues. One was a few sessions ago, a state senator proposed that there be a cooling off period before anybody could get a divorce in Colorado. Of course, if you go through that process, I think you get a fair bit of time anyway. But what about the idea of doing more to educate people before they get married, what their obligations are? Because the reality is, when you get married in Colorado, you're actually making a contract with the state of Colorado, where each party has certain obligations, whether it be to the other party or if you have children. And my sense is most people don't have a very good idea of what those obligations are. Nancy, what's your 2 cents?
Well, I think the 2 most important roles that we play are parenting and marriage. And there's the least amount of training and preparation. You have your own parents, perhaps. You have maybe some role models that have been out there for you. But to really recognize how you make it over the hump, and how you make those resolutions for, again, it goes back to the whole thing we keep talking about, problem solving, because, you know, whether it's a marriage or whether it is a parenting role, you're problem solving. You're trying to make sure that you are coming up with good solutions. So, you know, I know depending on where people go for where they get married, whether it's through a church or through a court, having some kind of counsel before makes very good sense. And I'm a real strong proponent of premarital counseling. And I think that you've got to get past infatuation to make sure that you are there for the long term. My husband and I have been married for 44 years, and it has not always been a cakewalk. You know, my husband should get gold stars. In fact, I think my mom was giving him gold stars for being married to me. I don't know what that was all about, but anyway. And so I think part of that is making sure that people have a better understanding of how you get through difficult times, and how that resolution can be prevented from leading to a divorce.
All right, so Sue, besides the state possibly giving out gold stars, what ideas or what thoughts do you have?
I was just flashing on the process that our Colorado Housing and Finance Authority goes through with first-time home buyers. You know, they have some special low down payment programs and other options for folks, but they all have to go through a workshop to understand what owning a home is all about, what your responsibilities are, what your benefits are.
What a great idea.
And gosh, maybe there could be something like that for folks that are planning to get married. It might be an idea.
No, I think that would be great. I mean, you know, churches could do it, different agencies could do it. I mean, and the idea maybe is as long as you go through a program somewhere. I mean, I think it would just be valuable for people to have in front of them a checklist of what their legal responsibilities are to each other and to having kids. I think a lot of people don't realize when you have kids, Susan, that you're legally responsible and financially responsible for those little munchkins until they're a certain age, and in some cases you may be responsible for them financially for decades. And I think a lot of people have kids and don't really understand that. But what are your thoughts?
Well, I have kids, and so I do understand that you know, there is some financial obligations that go along with them. You
don't just toss them out on the street every morning? Or?
Yeah, no, my neighbors wouldn't like that. But they're on their own now, so we're kind of moving away from that, at least at my house. I think that it would be important for folks to understand what children need and what is required of you to help them with what they need. And it's important that children are supported, and if that's what is going on in your marriage, if you're planning to have children, if you get married because you have a child, that you understand what those obligations are and make sure that you're going to be willing to meet them. So that's not a bad idea.
All right, well, maybe when we're off camera, I'll get some advice. I have a 21-year-old daughter, and I can't get her out of the house. So that's my challenge. All right, one of the things I want to talk about was the criminalization of laws. That you had the case with Eric Garner being killed by the police in New York, where he was illegally selling bootleg cigarettes. It seems, and one of the things that we've seen at the state level, at the municipal level, is every time a law is passed, not only if it's a civil offense, not only is there a potential fine involved, but included in that legislation are potential jail penalties. Do we need to take another look at that, where we're making everything potentially a criminal act, which then, of course, justifies the involvement of law enforcement and police with weapons? Nancy, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, when you started asking that question, I was reflecting back on several years ago carrying a bill on copper theft. You know, we saw a real rampant increase in copper being stolen from, homes, as well as even construction sites, right. Even in parks, some of the faucets and so forth. And at that time, it was a matter of, the people that had brought it to us, let's make this a felony, and it was like, okay, along with the felony, let's look at what the cost is, and is that really the direction we want to go? And so I think that that is one of my first questions when we have something that has a consequence that we need to bring in law enforcement. What is the cost going to be? We saw that with DUI, felony DUI, and the first year that it went through, and part of the reason that it failed was that the fiscal note on it was astronomical. Is it something we needed to address? Absolutely, but it needed to be modified, and in this last session we were able to pass it and to make that go through. But I think we have to be very careful of what that consequence looks like. Is it a fine to the individual? Is it putting in jail? Is it going to prison? Again, that consequence of if you go to prison, that's with you. If you have a felony, that's with you. And so then the coming back from that and being able to move forward in your life is a stigma, and it makes it not only a financial burden for the state, but it also makes it a difficulty for the individual.
Right. Well, I'm talking about things like you can go to jail if you don't shovel the snow off your walk. You know, to have jail sentences associated with, you know, or if you grow the wrong plant in your yard or whatever the case may be. To me, things like that seem like we've really taken things to an extreme, and you've talked about the burden of the prison system and corrections, and certainly various counties and cities have those challenges. Why are we passing laws that you can be put in jail for failing to file a form or shovel your walk or something like that? Does that make sense? Should the state take action and really ban those kinds of laws?
Well, I'm not aware of any law that will get you in jail for not shoveling your walk. I do know cities do assess fines for folks. In fact, that's what the case is in my neighborhood. And in fact, I think we are starting to move away from criminalizing things. There is recognition that we are putting a burden, especially on folks who are already in poverty, and then putting fines on top of fines, and issues, you know, like losing your license because you weren't able to pay a fine because you got a speeding ticket. And that, you know, inhibits a person's ability to get to work if they can't drive to work. So I think there's recognition, and I don't really see us passing those kinds of laws anymore. And I think we're starting to look at, you know, what we can do to be more proactive to help folks in those situations.
All right, well, I hope you're right. We're going to take our last break, and we will be right back.
I'm Aaron Harber, host of the Aaron Harber Show. We depend on contributions to support our work to bring you some of the nation's and world's top opinion leaders. Individuals, businesses, foundations, and other nonprofits make tax-deductible contributions to the Democracy and Media Education Foundation to allow us to work for you. To find out more or to make a donation, please go to dmefd.org. Thanks for watching the show and for your support. I'm Aaron Harber, host of the Aaron Harber Show. You can follow the show on Twitter and find us on Facebook to get all the latest updates, see behind-the-scene photos, and make comments and ask me questions. You can see episodes before their TV broadcast, so like the show today.
Your opinions, ideas, suggestions, and criticisms related to guests, topics, questions, or the host are welcome. Please send an email to producer@harbortv.com.
Welcome back. We're with Susan Lontine and Sue Ryden, and along from the Senate, Nancy Todd. So we're wrapping up. This is our last segment, so it's rapid fire time. Healthcare. I just got from Anthem a 100% premium increase letter yesterday. What is going on in our healthcare system? Can anyone answer that? And I'm dumping Anthem. Sorry, I have friends at Anthem. But
That's a significant increase. I was not aware of that. And wow, the first thing I would do would be to call the Department of Insurance to figure out how they were able to get away with raising your premiums that high.
Well, the plan I'm on, they're saying, is no longer going to be available. So to be fair to Anthem, they're not raising.
So you were grandfathered in.
I was grandfathered in, so they're saying if you want a similar plan,
I see.
double the check you send to us each month. And I was like, holy cow, that was, I mean, I'm sure other people are having the same experience, and they've got, you know, I'm fortunate. I mean, I could afford to pay that much if I want to. I don't. But a lot of people are going to talk about sticker shock. What is going on?
Well, I would definitely shop around. I think you could probably get a better deal than what you are being asked to pay for from Anthem. But, you know, healthcare costs are increasing. There's a lot of reasons why. One of the things that we've seen recently is, you know, this young man in New York, the venture capitalist who bought this pharmaceutical company, and they manufactured a drug that they were selling for $13.50, and he had raised the price to $750. Now that was something that got a lot of attention, but that's really not an isolated case.
That was per pill, by the way.
Per pill, yes.
Though he's lowered it back to some extent.
Well, he hasn't come back and told us exactly what he's lowering it to. So, I mean, it could be just $600. I really don't know. I haven't heard what the exact cost would be. But it's not an isolated example. Our healthcare costs are rising, and we need to do whatever we can to try to look at the pharmaceutical companies and make them be accountable for what they're, you know, putting us through.
Well, right now, under federal legislation, Medicare cannot negotiate drug prices.
No, it can't.
That strikes me as insane. Should we change that? I mean, you're not in the federal government, at least not yet, but should we change that law?
I think we should.
Sue?
Yes, I think we should. I think it was part of the negotiating and the bargaining to get the Affordable Care Act passed in the first place. But I think now we can start looking at some of those specific issues that weren't really addressed in that act and try to work on those.
What do you think? What do you think,
Well, I
Nancy?
think part of health care is helping people know and understand you don't go to the emergency room for everything. And so driving those costs down. And I don't know about anyone else here in the panel, but if you've gone to an emergency room setting recently or in the last year, you see people that are not, it's not really an emergency, but they haven't figured out another alternative. You know, right now, Walgreens, King Soopers, all of the different little corner clinics, even urgent care, are alternatives, and helping people know and understand what those alternatives are to keep the medical costs down is really important. And so the insurance premiums are a challenge that are really beyond what we can do legislatively. But it really is something that our insurance commissioner can certainly step in.
Well, the good news is that we have so many more people insured now. We are down to less than 7% uninsured in Colorado, and it was as high as 14 or 15% just a couple years ago. So things are working pretty well, but there will be cases like yours, and we encourage you to go to the exchange and shop.
All right, well, let's talk. We have less than a minute left. Let's talk about the exchange. We're spending, what is it, $50 million a year or some amazing number on that exchange. It works out to, I think, something like $300 per policy that the exchange sells. It's only selling about 150,000 policies a year, yet everybody with insurance is contributing to the cost of the exchange. Does the exchange make sense? Do we need an exchange, especially one that's costing us $300 per policy that it sells?
I think you're talking about the startup costs, really.
No, these are annual costs. This is their annual budget now.
But going forward, there will be more and more folks added to the exchange as being insured. And we are just now getting to the point where our businesses and our small businesses are going to be going to the exchange. So that's sort of the second phase of the operation, if you will.
I like your optimism. All right. Well, I guess we'll see in the future if those numbers hold up. I think they won't, but maybe I'm wrong. I've been wrong before. I know it's a rare occasion, but I want to thank Nancy Todd, Sue Ryden, and Susan Lontine for joining me today. I'm Aaron Harber. We'll see you next time.